Welcome to my channel, Whodunit channel.
By 10 minutes past 9, on a wet Thursday morning, Constable Ewan McRae had already decided that the day was going badly. This was not because anything particularly unfortunate had happened. No one had been arrested. No one had been murdered. There had not even been a serious argument in the village shop. That, Ewan felt, was precisely the problem. A quiet day in the Highland village of Glenbarra was dangerous. It gave people ideas. They began cleaning windows. They telephoned the police station to report suspicious sheep. They remembered ancient grievances. And worst of all, they expected the local constable to do something. Ewan had no intention of doing anything. He sat beside the cast-iron stove in the back room of the village hotel, both hands wrapped around a chipped white mug of coffee. His police cap lay on the table. His boots were muddy. His sandy hair had been flattened on one side by rain, and stood up on the other, as if it had developed an independent political opinion. Across the room, Mrs. Agnes Fraser was polishing glasses. She had been polishing the same glass for nearly 5 minutes. Ewan watched her. She watched him watching her. "You're supposed to be at the station," she said. "I was. And now, I'm not." Agnes sighed. "That's not an answer. It was the best one I've got." Outside, rain swept across the village in silver curtains. Glenbarra sat between dark hills and a narrow sea lock. Its handful of whitewashed cottages huddled together as if they were afraid the wind might carry them away. There was one hotel, one church, one post office, one small grocery, one garage, and a police station whose chief attraction was the excellent view of the graveyard. Ewan liked it. He especially liked the fact that there was very little to do. He had spent 7 years cultivating an unfortunate reputation for laziness. It had taken considerable effort. He had discovered that if he arrived 5 minutes late, people assumed he was careless. If he arrived 20 minutes late, they assumed he was incompetent. If he arrived precisely when needed, people began asking why he had not been promoted. Ewan preferred the first two. Promotion meant Stratharden. Stratharden meant traffic. Traffic meant paperwork. Paperwork meant supervisors. Supervisors meant people asking what he had been doing all day. Ewan considered this an intolerable prospect, so he drank his coffee. A gust rattled the hotel windows. Agnes glanced toward the door. "That'll be him." "Who?" "The Englishman." Ewan looked at her over the rim of his mug. "What Englishman?" "The one who's been expected." "I wasn't aware we were expecting anyone." "You wouldn't be." Agnes placed the polished glass on the shelf. "His name is Alistair Vane. Bought the old Dunmuir house." Ewan's expression changed very slightly. "Bought it, apparently. With money. So they say. That is generally how houses are purchased." Agnes ignored him. "He arrived yesterday." "Did he?" "Black motorcar." "Most cars are black in this weather." "Expensive black motorcar." "Ah, that changed matters." Agnes leaned closer. "He's bringing 3 servants, according to Mrs. McBride. Mrs. McBride thinks the postman is a spy. He is from Edinburgh. Same thing, apparently." Agnes lowered her voice. "He asked about the village." "People do that." "He asked about everyone." Ewan stopped drinking. "Everyone? Everyone." That was more interesting. Agnes continued polishing another glass. "He asked who owned which properties, who went to church, who had money, who had arguments with whom. Sounds sociable." "He asked about you." Ewan frowned. "What did you tell him?" "That you're useless." Ewan relaxed. "Good. And lazy. Even better. And that if he wanted anything done, he should ask someone else." Ewan smiled. "You're a very loyal citizen. I've known you since you were 12. The hotel door opened. A blast of cold air swept through the room. A man entered. He was tall, perhaps 50, with silver hair neatly combed back, and a dark green overcoat that looked as though it had never encountered mud. His shoes were polished. His face was narrow, pale, and faintly irritated by the existence of rain. He paused just inside the doorway. His eyes moved around the room. They settled on Ewan. For several seconds neither man spoke. Then the stranger smiled. "Constable McRae." Ewan took another sip of coffee. "Depends. On what? Who's asking?" The stranger removed his gloves. "Alistair Vane. I thought you might be." "How?" "You're wearing clean shoes." Agnes made a small choking sound. Mr. Vane looked at her, then back at Ewan. "I've heard you're the local police officer." "I'm afraid so. I understand this is a rather isolated community." "It is. I also understand there have been problems with trespassing around Dunmuir House." "Probably." "Probably." Ewan shrugged. "I haven't been trespassing there myself." Vane's mouth tightened. "I expect the police to take such matters seriously." Ewan glanced at Agnes. Do we? Agnes shook her head. Not before breakfast. Vane stared at them. Ewan could almost see the man's opinion forming. Lazy, backward, unimportant. Good, Ewan thought. The stranger had already made his first mistake. He believed appearances. That was useful. Perhaps you'd like to tell me what's been happening, Ewan said. Vane placed his gloves on the table. Someone entered my property last night. Did they take anything? No. Break anything? No. Leave anything? A pause. An object. What sort? A stone. Ewan waited. Vane looked annoyed. It was placed on my desk. That's unfortunate. You don't understand. Probably not. It was carved. Ewan's eyes narrowed. With what? I don't know. Could you describe it? Vane hesitated. An eye. Agnes stopped polishing. The rain struck the windows harder. For the first time that morning, Ewan felt that faint, unwelcome sensation he had learned to distrust. Interest. What kind of eye? He asked. Human. Realistic? Very. And what did you do with it? I threw it away. Ewan stared at him. Why? Because I don't collect rubbish. That's a shame. Why? Because someone went to the trouble of leaving it for you. Vane's expression hardened. Are you suggesting I should be grateful? No. Ewan stood. His chair scraped across the floor. He was taller than he looked when sitting down, and considerably less sleepy. Agnes noticed. She always did. Ewan picked up his cap. Let's have a look at Dunmuir. Vane looked surprised. I thought you weren't interested. I wasn't. What changed? Ewan pulled on his coat. You said the stone had an eye carved on it. And nothing. He opened the door. But I've just remembered something. Vane followed. What? Ewan looked back. Nobody in Glenbarra carves eyes on stones. The rain blew in around him. Not unless they want someone to notice. Dunmuir House stood half a mile outside the village, above a stretch of black rock overlooking the loch. It had been empty for 11 years. According to local tradition, it was haunted. According to the council records, it was structurally unsound. According to Agnes Fraser, it was haunted because it was structurally unsound. Ewan preferred her explanation. They drove up the narrow road in Vane's motorcar, because Ewan's police vehicle had refused to start that morning. He had not been surprised. His car had been manufactured with an optimistic understanding of Highland weather. Halfway up the hill, Vane spoke. You seem remarkably unconcerned. About what? The stone. I've seen worse. Such as a dead badger in a bathtub. Vane turned toward him. Ewan looked out the window. Long story. Dunmuir appeared through the mist. It was an impressive house, built from dark stone, with tall windows and chimneys leaning into the wind. The grounds were neglected, the lawns drowned beneath rain, and the surrounding trees bent inland as though trying to escape the sea. A figure stood near the garden wall. Ewan noticed it immediately. A woman. Grey coat, red scarf, watching the house. When the car approached, she turned and walked away. Who was that? Ewan asked. Vane looked. I don't know. You've lived here 2 days. Exactly. Ewan smiled faintly. Then you've already learned something. What? People in villages don't watch houses. Vane frowned. They watch people. They got out. The front door opened before Vane reached it. A young woman stood inside. She was perhaps 30, dark-haired, pale, and visibly annoyed. Mr. Vane. Clara. You've been gone for nearly an hour. I had business. Her eyes shifted toward Ewan. Who is this? Constable McCrae. Oh. The single syllable contained an astonishing amount of disappointment. Ewan liked her immediately. Morning. She did not answer. Vane entered. Ewan followed. The hallway smelled of damp stone, furniture polish, and something faintly sweet. He stopped. What? Vane asked. Ewan looked toward the drawing room. Nothing. They entered. The desk stood beneath the tall window. On its polished surface was a pale circle where something had recently rested. Ewan walked toward it. What was here? The stone. And you threw it away? Yes. Where? Vane pointed toward the fireplace. Ewan looked. The grate was empty. He crouched. Nothing. Then he noticed something near the hearth. A small scrap of red wool. He picked it up. Clara went pale. Vane noticed. Ewan noticed Vane noticing. And somewhere outside, beyond the rain-blurred windows, a raven gave a single harsh cry. Ewan slipped the scrap into his pocket. He had been hoping for a quiet Thursday. It appeared that Thursday had other plans, and, Ewan thought grimly, Thursday had brought an Englishman with it. Chapter 2. The Woman at the Garden Wall. The raven called again, sounding offended by the weather. Ewan McCrae disliked ravens. They were too observant. He straightened slowly from the hearth, keeping the scrap of red wool between two fingers. It was damp at the edge and smelled faintly of smoke. Clara noticed him looking at it. "That is nothing," she said. Ewan glanced at her. "Most things are. It could have come from anywhere." "Probably." Vane stepped closer. "What is it?" "A piece of wool. I can see that. Then we're both doing well." Vane's jaw tightened. Ewan enjoyed watching important men become irritated by small things. It was one of the few pleasures available to a rural policeman. He slipped the scrap into an envelope from his pocket. Clara stared at his hands. "Do you always carry evidence bags?" "No." "Then why have you got one?" "I found it in my lunch." She looked at him. He looked back. After a moment, she turned away. Ewan smiled. The drawing room was enormous and cold. The furniture had been covered in white sheets during the years the house stood empty, and the sheets had only recently been removed. Dust remained in corners. A grandfather clock stood against the far wall, ticking with exaggerated confidence. Ewan walked around the desk. "Where exactly was the stone?" "There," said Vane. He pointed to the center of the desk. Ewan studied the polished wood. No scratches, no mud, no obvious sign that anyone had entered through the window. He crossed to it. The window was locked. "Who has keys?" "I do." "Clara." "She has one." Clara spoke sharply. "And the housekeeper?" "What housekeeper?" "Mrs. Bell." "Where is she?" "Village." "Convenient." Vane frowned. "Are you suggesting she stole the stone?" "I haven't suggested anything." Clara gave a short laugh. Ewan looked at her. "Interesting." "What?" "Nothing." "You laughed." "I breathed." "Through your nose." She glared at him. Ewan decided he liked her even more. Outside, a car horn sounded. Clara went to the window. "The doctor." "Why is he here?" Vane asked. "He said he was coming." "Why?" "He wanted to speak to you." "Why?" Clara looked at him. "I don't know." Ewan watched her face. There was fear there. Not much, but enough. The front door opened downstairs. Footsteps crossed the hall. A moment later, an elderly man entered the drawing room, carrying a black medical bag. He was thin, white-haired, and red-faced from the cold. "Mr. Vane." "Dr. Ross." The doctor stopped when he saw Ewan. "Constable." "Doctor." Neither looked pleased. Ewan had known Dr. Ross for years. He had delivered village babies and attended funerals. "What's happened?" the doctor asked. "Nothing," said Vane. Ewan said, "Something." The doctor looked between them. "Which is it?" "Depends," Ewan replied. "Whether you ask the owner or the policeman." The room became silent. Ewan suddenly wished he had stayed at the hotel. The doctor placed his bag on a chair. "I came because I heard there was trouble." "Who told you?" "Mrs. McBride." "Of course." Ewan looked at Vane. "Does Mrs. McBride know everything?" "Usually before I do," Vane said. "That means she's useful." "She is a gossip." "In a village, same thing." The doctor glanced toward the window. "People don't like change." "I'm not asking permission to live here." "No," said the doctor quietly. "But someone may think you should." The room became silent. Ewan looked at the doctor. "Who?" Ross shook his head. "I don't know." "You came here to say that?" "I came to warn him." "That's useful." "I thought so." Ewan moved toward the door. "I'll have a word with Mrs. Bell." Vane frowned. "You're investigating." "I said I'd have a word." "It is in Glenbarra." He left the room before Vane could reply. The rain had weakened to mist. The woman was gone. Ewan walked around the house. He found footprints in the soft earth. 2 sets. One belonged to Vane. The shoes were large and neatly patterned. The other belonged to someone wearing narrow boots. The tracks came from the wall. They stopped beneath the drawing room window. Ewan crouched. There was something caught in the grass. A red thread. He touched it. He looked toward the road. The woman had been standing near the wall. Perhaps she had been watching the house. Perhaps she had been watching Vane. Ewan disliked perhaps. It made police work inconvenient. He walked back toward the car. Halfway down the drive, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Clara stood on the path. "Constable." "Yes?" "You shouldn't ask Mrs. Bell about the stone." "Why?" "She'll lie." "Does she lie well?" "Yes." "Then I'll listen carefully." Clara stepped closer. "You don't understand. That's becoming a popular opinion today." Her voice dropped. "The stone wasn't the first thing." Ewan stopped. "What?" "Yesterday morning, before Mr. Vane arrived, someone left a dead bird on the doorstep." "What kind?" "A blackbird." "Anything unusual about it?" "It had no eyes." For the first time that morning, Ewan did not have a joke ready. He looked toward Dunmuir House. The windows stared back through the mist. "Who found it?" "I did." Did you tell Vane? No, because I knew he would laugh. Ewan considered that. Did you? I'm not sure. She looked frightened. Constable. I think someone wants him gone. That's possible. They don't want him gone. Ewan waited. They want him afraid. A gust of wind moved through the trees. A door slammed inside. Clara whispered, "Someone is inside." He reached for his coat. "Stay here." He moved toward the house, then stopped. It was the grandfather clock. 3 slow chimes drifted through the building. Ewan looked at his watch. It was 11 o'clock. The clock was striking 3. "That's interesting," he murmured. Chapter 3. The Clock That Struck 3. Ewan McCrae had never trusted clocks. People trusted clocks because clocks looked certain. They had hands, numbers, a solemn ticking noise, and the irritating habit of making everyone late. This particular clock, however, had just struck 3 at 11 in the morning. Ewan stood beneath it and listened. 3, 3, 3. Then silence. Behind him Clara whispered, "What does that mean?" "That somebody ought to have repaired it." She stared at him. "You aren't frightened. I've lived here all my life. It takes more than a badly behaved clock." He crossed the hall and examined the case. The wooden door beneath the clock face was slightly open. Was it like that before? Clara shook her head. Ewan opened it. Inside, among the pendulum and weights, was a small object wrapped in brown paper. He reached for it. "Don't." The voice came from the drawing room. Ewan turned. Vane stood in the doorway. His face had gone pale. "What is it?" Ewan asked. "Nothing. You've already used that word." "I know what it is." Ewan removed the parcel. Vane moved forward. "Give it to me." "Why?" "Because it belongs to me." "That usually means you know what it is." Vane stopped. Clara watched him. Ewan unwrapped the paper. Inside lay a silver button. It was old, tarnished, and engraved with a tiny stag. Vane stared at it. Ewan noticed something else. The man's right hand was trembling. "Recognize it?" "No." "You're lying." Vane's expression hardened. "You have no right to accuse me." "I'm not accusing you." "Then what are you doing?" "Listening." The answer unsettled Vane more than an accusation might have done. Ewan turned the button over. On the back was a dark stain. "Blood?" Vane looked away. Clara stepped closer. "Where did you get that?" "I found it." "Where?" "In the clock." "Who put it there?" "I don't know." Ewan studied the 3 of them. A house full of secrets. A strange stone. A dead bird. A red thread. And now a blood-stained button. It was becoming an inconvenient morning. The front door opened. All 3 turned. An elderly woman entered carrying a basket. She was short, broad, and wrapped in a blue raincoat several sizes too large. "Mrs. Bell," Vane said. The woman stopped. Her eyes went immediately to Ewan. Then to the button. Her face changed. Only for a second. But Ewan saw it. "So," she said quietly. Ewan smiled. "So?" Mrs. Bell put the basket down. "You found it." Vane stared at her. "You knew about this?" She ignored him. "Where did you find the button?" "In the clock." Mrs. Bell closed her eyes. "Then it started again." Clara whispered. "What has?" The old woman looked at her. "The warnings." Ewan sighed. He disliked words like warnings, curses, signs, and destiny. They usually meant someone was trying to make ordinary crimes sound more interesting. "What warnings?" Mrs. Bell looked toward Vane. "Ask him." Vane turned sharply. "Don't. Tell him." "Mrs. Bell, you brought it back." The room fell silent. Ewan looked at Vane. "Brought what back?" Vane's face was rigid. "I have no idea what she's talking about." Mrs. Bell laughed bitterly. "You always were a coward." Vane stepped toward her. "Be careful." "Why?" "You'll send another letter." Ewan moved between them. "That sounds interesting." Neither answered. "Who sent a letter?" he asked. Mrs. Bell looked at Vane. "Ask him." Vane walked toward the door. "I've had enough." Ewan blocked him. "You can leave after we finish. I am the owner of this house. Congratulations. I don't have to answer to you." "No." Ewan smiled. "But you may have to answer to me if somebody dies." The words hung in the hallway. Clara looked frightened. Mrs. Bell crossed herself. Vane went very still. Ewan immediately regretted saying it, not because it was untrue, because of the way Vane reacted. The man's face had changed completely. For one instant, the polished English gentleman disappeared. What remained was fear. Real fear. "Who is going to die?" Ewan asked. Vane swallowed. "I don't know." That's the second lie you've told me. You're imagining things. No. Ewan held up the silver button. I'm remembering them. He placed it carefully into his pocket. I want you all to stay here. Vane laughed. You can't order me around. I can ask. And if I refuse, I'll become tiresome. You already are. Good. Ewan walked outside. The mist had thickened. Down by the garden wall, something moved. A man in a dark coat. He was walking toward the road. Ewan called out. The figure stopped, then ran. Ewan swore and followed. His boots slipped on wet grass. The stranger vaulted the low stone wall and disappeared among the trees. Ewan reached the wall and stopped. He could hear footsteps fading. He also heard something else. A vehicle engine. Down on the road, a dark motorcar pulled away. Ewan watched it vanish around the bend. He returned to the house. Clara was waiting. Who was it? I don't know. Did you see his face? No. What did he want? Ewan looked at the old house. I'm beginning to think he wanted us to know he was there. Clara frowned. Why? Because he made sure I saw him. Inside the hall, the grandfather clock began ticking again. Then, with no warning, it struck 3. Once, twice, 3 times. Ewan looked at his watch. 11 minutes past 11. He smiled without amusement. That's going to annoy me. Clara stared at the clock. What will you do? Go back to the village. That's all? For now. You're not going to investigate? I am investigating. You're leaving? Yes. Why? Ewan put on his cap. Because everyone here is frightened. He opened the door. And frightened people are much more likely to tell the truth after lunch. Outside, the rain began again. Ewan walked down the drive, already thinking about coffee. Behind him, in the silent house, someone quietly closed the drawing room door. Ewan never heard the lock turn. Chapter 4. Ask the Widow. Ewan returned to Glenbarra at 11:30, wet through, hungry, and deeply offended by the discovery that the hotel had run out of fresh rolls. Mrs. Fraser looked up from behind the counter. You're back early. I've been gone nearly 3 hours. Exactly. Ewan removed his coat. Coffee. Lunch first. Coffee. You're getting thin. I've always been thin. You're thinner. He accepted the coffee with the resignation of a man being punished for crimes he had not yet committed. At the table beside the window sat 3 villagers. They stopped talking when he entered. Ewan noticed. They noticed him noticing. Afternoon, he said. Nobody answered. He sat down. Mrs. Fraser brought him a plate of stew. News travels quickly, she said. What news? That you're investigating Dunmere. I am not investigating Dunmere. She raised an eyebrow. Then why were you there? Because I was asked to look at a stone. And? I looked. And what did you find? A button. Mrs. Fraser stopped. What kind? Silver. Stag on it. The room became silent. Ewan slowly lowered his spoon. You know it. I know of it. That's different. Not very. He waited. Mrs. Fraser glanced toward the other tables. Come into the kitchen. Ewan followed. She shut the door. The button belonged to the McAllister family. Dunmure's previous owners? Yes. Who wore it? I don't know. That's disappointing. You're always disappointed. It keeps expectations manageable. She ignored him. The McAllisters left years ago. Nobody here liked them. Why? They thought the village belonged to them. Sounds familiar. Vane's the same. Does Vane know about them? Probably. Did the McAllisters have enemies? Everyone has enemies. Specific ones. Mrs. Fraser sighed. There was a man named Rory Bell. Related to Mrs. Bell? Her husband. What happened to him? He died. When? 20 years ago. How? Boat accident. Ewan's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. Accident. That's what they called it. Who called it that? The police. Ah. Mrs. Fraser leaned against the counter. Rory Bell worked at Dunmere. As what? Gardener. Caretaker. Whatever they needed. Did he leave? No. He died there. On the lock. Ewan considered the silver button in his pocket. Did he wear a coat with silver buttons? I've no idea. Did he own a red scarf? Mrs. Fraser looked at him sharply. Why? Just asking. She studied his face. You found something else? Ewan smiled. I'm having a very productive day. Before she could answer, the hotel door opened. A young man entered, carrying a stack of newspapers. It was Jamie McBride, the postman's son, 17 years old and permanently covered in bicycle grease. He spotted Ewan. Constable, Jamie, there's something for you. He handed Ewan an envelope. No stamp, no address, only his name. Ewan turned it over. Where did you get this? It was on the station door. When? 10 minutes ago. Did you see who left it? Jamie shook his head. Anyone around? No. Ewan opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. 3 words had been written in black ink. Ask the widow. Ewan read it twice. Mrs. Fraser leaned closer. What does it say? Nothing useful. She snatched the paper. Her face changed. That's Mrs. Bell. You recognize the handwriting? No. You recognize the words. Mrs. Fraser folded the paper. You should leave this alone. That advice is becoming tiresome. Ewan. She rarely used his first name. He looked at her. She has suffered enough. Who? Mrs. Bell. What happened to her husband wasn't her fault. Who said I thought it was? Mrs. Fraser looked away. That was answer enough. Ewan finished his coffee. I'll see her. She won't talk. Most people talk. Not her. They always do eventually. He walked toward the door. Jamie called after him. Constable. Ewan turned. There was another thing. What? Someone was asking about you. Who? Man in a green coat. Ewan frowned. Vain. No. Describe him. Tall. Dark hair. Had a scar here. Jamie touched his left cheek. Anything else? He smoked a pipe. Ewan nodded. Thank you. Jamie hesitated. He asked where you lived. Ewan stopped. Mrs. Fraser's expression hardened. What did you tell him? Nothing. Good lad. Ewan stepped outside. The rain had stopped. For the first time all morning, sunlight touched the hills. It lasted approximately 30 seconds. Then the clouds returned. Glenbarra had never been sentimental about weather. Ewan walked toward Mrs. Bell's cottage. It stood behind the church, surrounded by overgrown roses and a crooked wooden fence. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. The door was unlocked. Ewan pushed it open. Mrs. Bell? Silence. The cottage smelled of peat smoke and lavender. A kettle sat on the stove. A cup had been placed beside it, still warm. Ewan walked farther inside. On the kitchen table lay an old photograph. He picked it up. 4 people stood outside Dunmuir House. A younger Alistair Vane was among them. Ewan stared. Vane had not mentioned knowing the McAllisters. Beside him stood a young woman. Ewan recognized her immediately. Clara. The photograph was at least 20 years old. Behind them stood Rory Bell, and beside Rory stood a 5th person whose face had been scratched away. Ewan heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Mrs. Bell stood in the doorway. She looked at the photograph, then at Ewan. You found it. What is this? My mistake. Which one? Trusting the wrong man. Who scratched out the face? She closed the door. The man who has just come back. Ewan's hand moved toward his coat pocket. The man in the green coat. Mrs. Bell nodded. No. She looked toward the window. His son. Ewan felt the room grow colder. Whose son? Mrs. Bell whispered the name. Rory Bell's. Ewan looked again at the photograph. The scratched face suddenly seemed more important than the living ones. Outside, a gull screamed over the churchyard. Mrs. Bell crossed herself. He knows about Dunmuir, she said. And he knows what your policeman found there. Ewan frowned already. Chapter 5. The man who watched Dunmuir. Ewan frowned already. Who is he? Mrs. Bell did not answer immediately. She crossed to the stove and turned down the flame beneath the kettle. His name is Callum Bell. Your son. My stepson. The man in the photograph. She nodded. He was 16 when Rory died. Where has he been? Everywhere. That isn't a place. It is when you've spent your life running. Ewan leaned against the table. Why did he run? Because people thought he killed his father. Did he? No. You sound certain. I was there. At the accident? Mrs. Bell looked toward the window. I was there when Rory left the house that night. What happened? He had argued with Alistair Vane. About what? Money. Ewan waited. Mrs. Bell sighed. Rory discovered that the McAllisters were planning to sell part of the estate. They intended to move several families from their cottages. Why? To make room for holiday houses. 20 years ago. The idea wasn't new. Vane was involved. He was an advisor. An advisor to the McAllisters? Yes. Ewan rubbed his chin. And Callum? Callum hated them. Understandable. He threatened Alistair. That isn't murder. No. But it made him look guilty. Mrs. Bell nodded. The night Rory died, Callum disappeared. For how long? 3 days. And when he returned, he said he had been on the hills. Was that true? I don't know. Ewan studied her. You're protecting him. I am. Why? Because someone must. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Both looked toward the ceiling. Ewan straightened. Is anyone else here? No. Another creak, Then silence. Ewan moved toward the staircase. Mrs. Bell caught his sleeve. Don't. Why? He wants you to find him. Who? Callum? Ewan listened. Nothing. He climbed slowly. The upper hallway was dark. 4 doors stood along it. The first opened onto a bedroom, empty. The second was locked. The third contained boxes. The fourth opened onto a small room with a narrow window overlooking Dunmuir House. Someone had been staying there. A blanket lay on the floor. A cup sat beside the window. The cup was warm. Ewan touched it. Your stepson has been here. Mrs. Bell appeared behind him. Yes. When? Last night. Why didn't you tell me? He asked me not to. That usually makes me more curious. She sighed. He came to warn me. About what? Vane. Again? He said Vane was not the same man he remembered. Ewan looked through the window. Dunmuir House was barely visible through the rain. What did Callum think Vane was doing? Looking for something. What? I don't know. You do. Mrs. Bell's face tightened. I know what Rory found before he died. Ewan turned. What? A ledger. Where is it? Gone. Who took it? Vane. Are you sure? Rory told me. When? The evening he died. Ewan considered this. Why would a ledger matter 20 years later? Because it contained names. Whose names? People who were paid. For what? Mrs. Bell's eyes filled with tears. To keep quiet. Ewan said nothing. The cottage suddenly seemed smaller. About what? About the fire. What fire? The old boathouse. Ewan remembered the story. Everyone in Glenbarra knew about the boathouse fire. It had burned shortly before Rory's death. The official report had called it an accident caused by a faulty stove. Rory said it wasn't an accident. He said someone wanted it burned. Why? He had found documents inside. What documents? Land agreements. Ewan frowned. And the ledger recorded payments. Yes. To whom? Mrs. Bell looked directly at him. Villagers. Ewan let out a slow breath. That would explain why nobody talks about it. Yes. Who knows? Too many. Who doesn't? She gave a sad smile. Almost nobody. A sharp sound came from outside. Ewan crossed to the window. A stone had struck the glass. He looked down. Another stone lay in the grass. Tied around it was a strip of red wool. Ewan opened the window. On the stone, written in black ink, were 4 words. Stop asking questions. Constable. Mrs. Bell began to tremble. Ewan picked up the stone. Callum did this? No. How do you know? Because he would never threaten you. Ewan looked at the handwriting. Who would? Mrs. Bell whispered. The man who killed Rory. Ewan turned. You said Rory's death was an accident. I said that was what the police called it. Do you believe it was murder? I know it was. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because 20 years ago, the people who knew the truth were afraid. And now they are old. Ewan glanced toward the photograph. Vane isn't old. No. He came back because of the ledger. Yes. And Callum came back because of Vane. Yes. Ewan put the stone into his pocket. Where is Callum now? Mrs. Bell looked toward the hills. He said he would watch Dunmuir. From where? She pointed toward the churchyard. The old shepherd's hut. Ewan pulled on his coat. Mrs. Bell grabbed his arm. Constable. He turned. If you find him, don't arrest him. Why? Because he isn't the danger. Who is? She looked toward Dunmuir House. Ask Alistair Vane why he was at the boathouse 20 years ago. Ewan paused. That was precisely the question he intended to ask. He left the cottage and walked into the rain. Halfway across the churchyard, he saw someone standing beside the graves. A tall man in a dark coat. He was smoking a pipe. Ewan stopped. The man raised one hand, then turned toward the hills. Ewan followed. He had finally found the stranger, and the stranger had been waiting for him. Ewan quickened his pace, but the stranger vanished behind the stone wall. He reached the corner and found grass, heather, and a footprint pressed into the mud. Beside it lay a matchbox, empty except for one word. Den im ar. Ewan pocketed it. Then a whistle sounded twice, followed by silence. He looked toward the hill and smiled grimly. Someone was playing a game. Unfortunately, he wasn't good at games. Chapter 6. The Chapel at 3. Ewan had always believed that anyone who whistled twice in a fog was either a shepherd or a fool. The man in the dark coat had looked like neither. He crossed the churchyard, keeping low behind the stone wall. Rain ticked against the gravestones. Beyond them, the old shepherd's hut crouched beneath the hill, its roof black with moss. The door stood open. Ewan stopped. Callum Bell. Nothing. He entered. The hut smelled of damp wool, peat and tobacco. A small fire had burned recently in the grate. Beside it sat a tin cup, a blanket, and a pair of binoculars. Ewan picked up the binoculars. On the table lay a map of Dunmuir House. Several places had been marked with pencil: the boathouse, the drawing room, the garden wall, and the old clock tower. Ewan frowned. The clock tower was not part of Dunmuir House. It stood half a mile away, abandoned since the church roof had been repaired decades earlier. A sound came from behind him. "Put those down." Ewan turned. Callum Bell stood in the doorway. He was about 40, perhaps a little older, with dark hair streaked with grey. His face was lean, weather-beaten and tired. A scar ran from his left eyebrow toward his cheek, the man Jamie had described. "You've been watching Dunmuir," Ewan said. Callum looked at the map. "You shouldn't be here. That's becoming popular advice." Callum almost smiled. "You're not what I expected. People say that. They said you were lazy. I am. They said you were stupid. I've worked hard at it." Callum studied him. "Then why are you here?" Ewan pointed to the map. "You tell me." Callum stepped inside and closed the door. For a moment neither spoke. Then Callum said, "Your friend Vane is dangerous." "Why?" "Because he knows what happened." "To Rory?" Callum nodded. "And to the boathouse?" Ewan leaned against the wall. "Tell me." "I can't." "Can't or won't?" "Both." "That saves time." Callum looked toward the window. 20 years ago, my father found something beneath the boathouse." "The ledger?" "No." Ewan waited. "A room. A room. Hidden beneath the floor." Ewan stared at him. "What was inside?" "Boxes." "Of what?" "Documents. Letters. Old contracts. Anything connecting Vane to the McAllisters." "Yes." "What?" "Payments." "Like Mrs. Bell said?" Callum nodded. "People were paid to sign away land." Ewan's expression hardened. "And the villagers? Some accepted money. Some were threatened. Some were promised jobs. Who arranged it?" Callum looked directly at him. "Alistair Vane." Ewan exhaled. "That doesn't explain the murder." "No." "Then explain Rory." Callum's face tightened. "My father confronted Vane. And he told him he would expose everything." "Did Vane threaten him?" "Yes." "Witnesses?" "My mother." "Anyone else?" Callum hesitated. "One man." "Who?" "I don't know his name." "You're making this difficult." "He was an outsider." "Like Vane?" "Yes." "What did he look like?" "Tall. Dark hair. Scar." Ewan thought of the man in the churchyard. "Pipe?" Callum nodded. Ewan felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the weather. "Where is he now?" "I don't know." "He's here." Callum stared. "What?" "I saw him." "When?" "Today." Callum moved toward the door. "Where?" "In the churchyard." "Then we have a problem." "We?" Callum gave him a tired smile. "You're involved now." Ewan sighed. "I was involved when someone started throwing stones." Callum looked toward the hill. "He knows about the ledger. Where is it?" "I don't know." "You must have some idea." Callum shook his head. "My father hid it." "Where?" "He left a clue." "What clue?" "A button." Ewan's hand moved unconsciously toward his pocket. Callum noticed. "You found it?" "Yes." "Where?" "In the grandfather clock." Callum went pale. "That isn't where he hid it." Ewan stared at him. "Then someone moved it." "Why?" "To make you think the clock mattered." Callum stepped closer. "The clock does matter." "How?" "It has a compartment." Ewan remembered the parcel. "Where?" "Behind the face." Ewan's mind returned to the drawing room. The clock had struck 3 at 11. Someone had opened its lower door. The button had been wrapped in paper and placed among the mechanism. "What does 3 mean?" Callum looked at him. "It's not 3. "What?" "It's a letter." Ewan frowned. 3? "The third letter. C." Callum nodded. "C for Callum?" "No." "Then what?" "C for chapel." Ewan felt the pieces shift. "The old chapel." "Yes." "What is there?" "The ledger." A gust of wind struck the hut. Ewan straightened. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I didn't know if I could trust you, and now I don't." "Fair enough." Callum opened the door. "Then why tell me?" "Because the man with the scar knows where the chapel is." Ewan looked toward the distant ruins. "Then we'd better get there first." They left the hut together. The rain had stopped, but the clouds hung low over the hills. They crossed the moor in silence, following an old path toward the ruined chapel. Halfway there, Ewan noticed footprints. 2 people had passed recently. One wore narrow boots. The other wore polished shoes. Ewan crouched. "Vane." Callum looked ahead. "He's already here." They reached the chapel. The door was open. Inside, dust covered the stone floor. Broken pews leaned against the walls. A small wooden altar stood beneath a cracked window. Callum pointed. Behind that. Ewan moved the altar aside. There was a loose stone. He lifted it. Beneath it was a metal box. Neither man touched it. A voice came from the doorway. Step away from the box. Ewan turned. Alistair Vane stood there. Beside him was the man with the scar. The stranger smiled. And Ewan realized the worst thing about the morning was not that he had found the truth. It was that the truth had found him first. For once, Ewan wished he had stayed at the hotel. The coffee had been terrible, but at least it had never pointed a pistol at him on Thursday morning before lunch. Chapter 7. The box beneath the chapel. For several seconds, nobody moved. Ewan looked at the pistol, then at Vane. Then at the stranger with the scar. Finally, he looked at Callum. This is becoming unnecessarily social, Ewan said. The stranger smiled. You always joke when you're frightened. No. I joke when other people are frightened. Vane's face remained pale. Step away from the box, constable. Ewan kept one hand resting on the loose stone. Why? Because it belongs to me. That's interesting. It was hidden on my property, under a chapel, on land belonging to Dunmuir. Ewan glanced at Callum. Callum shook his head. Not according to the old maps. Vane's eyes narrowed. You know nothing about the property. I know enough. The stranger lifted the pistol slightly. Enough talking. Ewan raised both hands. Good idea. Callum looked ready to spring. Ewan caught his eye. Don't. Callum understood. The stranger stepped forward. Open the box. Ewan crouched. The metal lid was rusted at the hinges. He lifted it carefully. Inside lay a leather ledger, several envelopes, and a small silver photograph frame. Vane inhaled sharply. The stranger moved closer. Take the ledger. Ewan picked it up. It was heavier than expected. Now give it to me. Ewan looked at the cover. Someone had carved 3 letters into the leather. R.B. Rory Bell, he said. Vane's expression changed. The stranger noticed. Ewan noticed him noticing. That was useful. Why are you frightened of a dead gardener? Ewan asked. He isn't frightened, the stranger said. Vane turned on him. Enough. The stranger's eyes hardened. You said he knew nothing. I said nothing of the sort. You lied. Ewan smiled faintly. I seem to have arrived at the right moment. The stranger pointed the pistol toward him. Give me the book. Ewan held it out. At the last instant he dropped it. The ledger struck the floor. The stranger cursed and bent to retrieve it. Callum moved. He knocked the man's wrist aside. The pistol fired. The shot exploded through the chapel. A cloud of dust fell from the ceiling. Ewan lunged forward. He caught the stranger around the waist. They crashed against an old pew. The pistol skidded beneath the altar. Vane ran. Callum chased him. Ewan wrestled with the stranger, who was stronger than he looked. The man drove an elbow into Ewan's ribs. Pain flashed through him. That's rude, Ewan gasped. The stranger struck again. Ewan ducked. The man's fist smashed into the wall. Ewan grabbed his coat and twisted. The stranger stumbled. Ewan kicked the pistol farther away. Now, Ewan said, breathing hard. We can discuss your poor manners. The stranger headbutted him. Stars flashed before Ewan's eyes. He staggered backward. The man ran toward the chapel door. Ewan followed. Outside, Callum was wrestling with Vane beside the graveyard wall. Leave him, Ewan shouted. Callum released Vane. The stranger was already halfway across the field. Ewan ran after him. He was not fast. He had never needed to be. Most people running from police eventually became tired. This man did not. He reached the stone bridge over the stream and turned. For a moment, Ewan saw his face clearly. Not a stranger, a familiar face. He had seen him before. In the village. At the hotel. Behind Mrs. Fraser's counter. The man smiled. You remember me. Ewan stopped. Yes. The man jumped from the bridge into the stream. Ewan reached the edge. The water below was swollen by rain. The man had vanished. Callum arrived beside him. Who was he? Ewan looked down. Someone I've been ignoring. Who? Peter Sloane. Callum stared. The estate agent? Yes, but he left Glenbarra yesterday. Apparently he changed his mind. They returned to the chapel. Vane stood alone beside the broken doorway. His coat was torn. His confidence had disappeared. Ewan picked up the ledger. Tell me everything. Vane said nothing. Ewan opened the book. Pages of names and figures filled the first section. Payments, dates, land parcels, initials. Then Ewan saw a familiar name. Agnes Fraser. He looked again. Mrs. Fraser had received money 20 years earlier. Callum saw it. My mother? No. Then who? Ewan turned the page. There it was. Agnes Fraser. And beside her name was a note. Witness to fire. Callum went pale. Vane closed his eyes. Ewan understood. The village gossip. The sudden silence whenever the boathouse was mentioned. The warnings. The missing ledger. Someone had spent 20 years protecting a secret, and now the secret was walking back into Glenbarra. Ewan looked at Vane. Why did you return? Vane stared at him. I didn't. You bought Dunmuir. Yes. That's returning. I came because Sloane contacted me. Why? He said he had found the ledger. Did you know where it was? No. Then why come? Vane hesitated. To destroy it. Callum stepped forward. You murdered my father. No. You threatened him. Yes. You were at the boathouse. Yes. Then what happened? Vane looked exhausted. Rory confronted Sloane. Ewan frowned. Sloane killed him. No. Who did? Vane swallowed. Agnes. Silence. The name seemed impossible. Ewan shook his head. Mrs. Fraser. Vane nodded. She struck Rory during an argument. With what? A fireplace poker. Accident. Yes. Then why hide it? Because Sloane threatened everyone. Ewan stared at him. What did he have? Proof. Of what? The land scheme. Vane looked toward the ledger. And proof that Rory's death wasn't the only crime. Ewan closed the book. Before he could ask another question, a bell rang in the village below. Once. Twice. 3 times. Ewan looked toward the chapel clock. It was gone. Callum whispered, 3. Ewan nodded. See. Chapel. No. Ewan looked at the ledger. Cemetery. Something cold moved through him. The next clue isn't here. He turned toward Glenbarra. And whoever planted it knows we're coming. Behind them, Vane whispered one final sentence. Constable. You should be afraid. Ewan put the ledger under his coat. I am. He smiled. I'm just not afraid enough to stop. Chapter 8. The Grave Without a Name. Ewan reached the village cemetery with Callum close behind, and Vane several paces farther back. The rain had returned, fine and cold, turning the paths between the graves into ribbons of black mud. The cemetery was old enough to contain stones worn smooth by weather, and names nobody in Glenbarra remembered. At the far end stood a row of neglected graves belonging to fishermen, servants and children. Beyond them was a low wall overlooking the sea. Where? Callum asked. Ewan looked at the ledger. There should be a clue here. That isn't very specific. I was hoping the dead would be more helpful. Callum gave him a tired look. You joke too much. It keeps me cheerful. You don't look cheerful. I'm very good at hiding it. They searched the stones. Nothing. Ewan crouched beside a grave covered in moss. The inscription was almost unreadable. Margaret Bell. He looked at Callum. Your mother? No. My grandmother. When did she die? 20 years ago. Ewan brushed away the moss. There was a small mark beneath the name. A carved eye. Callum went pale. That wasn't there before. Ewan touched the stone. Neither was this. A narrow metal key had been pushed into a crack. He pulled it free. A number was stamped into the handle. 17. 17, Callum whispered. What does it open? I don't know. Ewan looked toward Vane. Do you? Vane had stopped walking. His face was grim. The boathouse. Callum turned sharply. You said it burned. It did. So what does the key open? There was a cellar. Ewan frowned. Under the boathouse. Vane nodded. Rory knew about it. Why didn't you tell me? Because the cellar was sealed after the fire. By whom? Vane hesitated. Sloane. Ewan slipped the key into his pocket. Then that's where we're going. No, Vane said. Ewan looked at him. Why? Sloane will expect you. Good. He wants the ledger. He can have it. Callum stared. You're going to give it to him? Of course. Callum looked horrified. Ewan smiled. Eventually, they left the cemetery. Mrs. Fraser was waiting outside the hotel when they returned. Her face was unusually pale. You found it, she said. Ewan stopped. Found what? The ledger. He looked at Callum. Callum looked at Vane. Vane looked away. Mrs. Fraser sighed. You've always been terrible at pretending, Ewan. I've been pretending to be terrible for years. And now I'm tired. She stepped aside. Come in. Inside the hotel, the tables were empty. The fire burned brightly. Someone had drawn the curtains despite the afternoon light. Mrs. Fraser locked the door. I received a letter. When? 10 minutes ago. From Sloane. Yes. What did it say? She handed Ewan the paper. 3 lines. BRing the ledger to the old boathouse. Come alone. Midnight. Ewan folded the letter. Did he threaten you? No. That worries me. Why? He didn't need to. Mrs. Fraser sat down. I should have told the truth 20 years ago. Yes. She looked at him. You're angry. A little. I was afraid. I know. I thought if I kept quiet, nobody else would die. Did it work? Her eyes filled with tears. No. Ewan sat opposite her. Tell me what happened. Mrs. Fraser looked at the fire. Rory discovered the land payments. He confronted Alistair. They argued. I went to the boathouse because I knew Rory was there. What happened? He was holding the ledger. And? Sloane arrived. Why? He wanted the documents. Then what? Mrs. Fraser's hands trembled. Rory refused. Did Sloane attack him? No. Then who did? I did. Silence. I struck Rory with the poker, she whispered. Why? He grabbed me. And you panicked. Yes. Did he die immediately? No. Ewan's voice softened. What happened next? Sloane told me he would take care of everything. You believed him. I had no choice. There is always a choice. I was terrified. Ewan did not answer. Mrs. Fraser continued. Sloane set the fire. He made it look like an accident. Then he told everyone Rory had fallen into the lock, and you let them believe it. Yes. Callum stood near the window, staring outside. My father was alive when you left him. Mrs. Fraser began to cry. I know. Callum turned. You left him there. I was frightened. You let him die. Ewan stepped between them. Enough. Callum stared at him. She killed him. She caused his death. That is the same thing. No. Ewan looked toward Mrs. Fraser. But it isn't innocent either. Nobody spoke. Then the hotel door rattled. Everyone froze. Someone knocked. 3 times. Ewan moved toward the entrance. Stay back. He opened the door. Nobody stood outside. Only a small parcel lay on the step, wrapped in red wool. Ewan carried it inside. The room became silent. He opened the parcel. Inside was a photograph. It showed the old boathouse before the fire. Rory stood outside. Beside him was Mrs. Fraser. Behind them stood Sloane, and in the doorway was another man. Ewan recognized him immediately. Alistair Vane. On the back of the photograph someone had written, You still don't know who lit the match. Ewan looked at Vane. Vane shook his head. I didn't. Mrs. Fraser whispered. Neither did I. Callum stared at Sloane's image. Then who did? Ewan turned the photograph over again. There was something else written beneath the first sentence. One of you is lying. Ewan looked around the room. Nobody moved. Then the grandfather clock outside struck 3. Once. Twice. 3 times. Ewan smiled slowly. Someone has just made a mistake. Callum frowned. What mistake? They gave us a photograph. Why is that a mistake? Because photographs have shadows. Ewan held the photograph beneath the lamp. One figure cast a shadow in the wrong direction. His expression changed. The person who took this picture wasn't standing where they claimed. Vane stepped closer. What does that mean? It means the photograph was taken inside the boathouse. Nobody spoke. Mrs. Fraser whispered. Then the photographer saw everything. And may still be alive, Ewan said. A floorboard creaked outside. Ewan reached for his coat. Stay here. He opened the door. Footsteps hurried through the rain. Ewan followed. Behind him, Callum shouted his name. Ewan did not stop. The mystery was running away. Chapter 9. The photograph's shadow. Ewan ran through the rain, following the footsteps toward the harbor. The stranger moved quickly, but not quickly enough. Wet stones reflected the yellow glow of the hotel windows, and the wind carried the smell of salt, peat smoke, and distant wood smoke. At the harbor, the footsteps stopped. Ewan looked around. Nothing. Only fishing boats rocking against their ropes. Then he noticed a door standing open in the old net shed. He entered. The shed was dark, except for a narrow beam of moonlight falling through a broken roof panel. Nets hung from wooden hooks, dripping steadily onto the floor. Ewan heard breathing. Come out, he said. Silence. I've had a long day. A figure moved behind the nets. Ewan stepped closer. A woman emerged. She was perhaps 60, with silver hair tucked beneath a woolen hat. Ewan recognized her. Mrs. McBride. The village gossip smiled sadly. I wondered when you'd work it out. You took the photograph. Yes. You were at the boathouse 20 years ago. Yes. You saw Rory die. Mrs. McBride lowered her eyes. I saw enough. Why didn't you speak? Because Sloane threatened my family. You have a family. A daughter. Where is she? Edinburgh. Safe. I hope so. Ewan leaned against a post. Tell me exactly what happened. Mrs. McBride swallowed. Rory was arguing with Mrs. Fraser. I arrived because I had gone to collect my husband. He was helping repair the boats. What did you see? Rory grabbed Agnes's arm. She struck him. With the poker? Yes. Then Sloane arrived. Yes. Was Rory alive? Yes. Conscious? Barely. What did Sloane do? Mrs. McBride closed her eyes. He smiled. Ewan said nothing. He told Agnes not to worry. He said he could make everything disappear. And then, he carried Rory toward the cellar. Ewan frowned. The cellar? Yes. Why? I don't know. Did Rory survive? I heard him shouting. How long? Several minutes. And then, a sound. What sound? A heavy door. Ewan felt cold. Sloane locked him inside. Mrs. McBride nodded. I ran. You left him. I was afraid. Everyone was. She looked at him. Except one person. Who? Vane. Ewan frowned. He arrived later? Yes. Why? He knew what Sloane was doing. Did he help Rory? No. Why? He was afraid the ledger would expose him, so he let Rory die. Mrs. McBride nodded. Ewan stared at the floor. Then who started the fire? I don't know. Was Sloane still there? Yes. Was Vane? Yes. Was Agnes? No. Then one of those two men lit it. I thought so. You photographed them? Yes. Why? I wanted proof. And then? I hid the camera. Where? In my house. Do you still have it? No. Who took it? Sloane. Ewan's eyes narrowed. When? 3 days later. Then how did you keep the photograph? I had made copies. How many? 3. Where are the others? One was burned. One? The second was sent to a solicitor. Which solicitor? Mr. Fraser in Inverness. Ewan's eyebrows rose. Agnes's husband? Yes. That explained another silence. And the third? Mrs. McBride looked toward the harbour. It's in the boathouse. Ewan stared. You sent Sloane a message? No. You knew about the photograph? No. Then who did? Mrs. McBride looked frightened. The person who has been watching us. A whistle sounded outside. 2 notes. Ewan turned toward the door. Stay here. He stepped into the rain. A shadow moved beside the boats. Ewan followed it. The figure ran toward the old boathouse. Ewan chased him. The stranger disappeared through the broken door. Ewan entered. The interior smelled of damp timber. Come out. No answer. He moved deeper inside. A floorboard creaked, then another. He looked down. One plank had been recently lifted. Ewan crouched and pulled it aside. Beneath it was a narrow staircase. He descended. The cellar was almost completely dark. At the bottom stood a wooden chair. On it lay a leather case. Ewan opened it. Inside was an old camera. Beside it sat 3 photographs. The first showed Rory. The second showed Agnes. The third showed Sloane, standing beside the cellar door. Ewan lifted the photograph. Behind Sloane stood Vane, but there was someone else. A 4th figure. A woman. Ewan recognized her. Clara. He stared. The photograph had been taken 20 years ago. Clara had been a child, but she had been there. A voice spoke behind him. She saw everything. Ewan turned. Sloane stood at the bottom of the stairs. His pistol was raised. You've been very troublesome, Constable. Ewan looked at him. So I've been told. Sloane smiled. Give me the photographs. No. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You think this is about murder. It is. No. Sloane stepped closer. It is about ownership. Of the land. Of the truth. Ewan glanced at the cellar door. You locked Rory in here. Sloane's smile disappeared. He was already dying. You left him. I had no choice. Everyone says that. Sloane raised the pistol. You should have stayed in your hotel. Ewan smiled. I tried. Then the cellar door slammed open above them. Callum appeared. Callum appeared. Sloane turned. Ewan moved. He struck the pistol from Sloane's hand. Callum kicked it across the floor. Sloane lunged for the stairs. Ewan caught him. They struggled. The cellar shook with their weight. Finally, Ewan forced him against the wall and held him there. You're under arrest. Sloane laughed breathlessly. For what? Ewan looked at the photographs. For murder. Sloane stopped laughing. Above them, footsteps thundered down the stairs. Vane appeared, then Agnes. Then Mrs. McBride. Everyone stared at Sloane. Ewan looked around the cellar. The truth had finally gathered in one place. And for once, nobody could run. Chapter 10. Almost nothing at all. The truth had finally gathered in one place. Ewan looked at the faces around the cellar. Agnes Fraser was crying silently. Mrs. McBride stood with both hands clasped. Callum stared at Sloane as though 20 years of anger had suddenly acquired a face. Vane looked older than he had that morning. Sloane was the only one smiling. "You think this changes anything?" he asked. Ewan kept one hand on his shoulder. "It changes my afternoon. You have no evidence." Ewan lifted the camera. "I have photographs. Photographs prove nothing. They prove you were here." "I was." "They prove Vane was here." Vane closed his eyes. "They prove Mrs. Fraser was here." Agnes began to sob. "And they prove Rory was alive after you brought him downstairs." Sloane's smile vanished. Callum stepped forward. "My father was alive. For a while," Mrs. McBride whispered. Sloane looked at her. "You should have stayed silent. You should have left the village," she replied. Ewan glanced at Vane. "Tell me the rest." Vane looked toward the floor. "Sloane arranged the land scheme. I helped him." "Why? Money. That simple?" "Yes." "Rory discovered the payments." "Yes." "And Agnes struck him." "Yes." "Then Sloane locked him here." Vane nodded. "What happened afterward?" "I came back." "When?" "After the fire began." "Who started it?" Vane hesitated. Sloane laughed. "Tell him." Vane looked at Ewan. "I did." Silence. Agnes covered her mouth. "Why?" "To destroy the documents. And Rory. I thought he was dead." Ewan looked at Sloane. "But he wasn't." "No." "Then you knew?" Sloane's face hardened. "I heard him. Alive." "Yes." "And you still left him?" Sloane said nothing. That silence was answer enough. Ewan took out his notebook. "Mrs. McBride, you will give a statement." She nodded. "Agnes?" The older woman wiped her eyes. "I will." "Vane?" "Yes." "Sloane?" He laughed. "You think Stratharden will believe you?" "They will." "You're a nobody." Ewan smiled. "That is exactly what I want them to think." Sloane stared at him. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Ewan turned to Callum. "Get the constable's car." "It's broken." "Then get someone else's." Callum almost smiled. "You really are lazy." "Thank you." They climbed out of the cellar. Outside, the rain had stopped. The evening sky had cleared over the hills, leaving the peaks dark against a pale strip of sunset. Ewan stood beside the boathouse. For the first time in 20 years, Glenborough knew what had happened there. The villagers would talk. Of course they would. By morning, everyone would know. By breakfast, everyone would know a slightly different version. By lunchtime, Mrs. McBride would probably have become the heroine of the story. Ewan was not concerned. He was more concerned about DCI Blair. The detective chief inspector arrived from Stratharden just after 8. He stepped from the police car wearing an expensive coat and an expression suggesting that rural Scotland had personally offended him. He looked at Sloane, then Vane, then the photographs. Finally he looked at Ewan. "You caught them." Ewan shrugged. "They were here." Blair frowned. "That's not an answer." "It was the best one available." Blair turned to the officers behind him. "Take them." Sloane protested. "This policeman has no idea what he's doing." Blair looked at Ewan. "McRae." Ewan yawned. "I was hoping you'd say that." Blair studied the evidence. For several moments he said nothing. Then his face changed. He understood. The photographs, the ledger, the witnesses, the confession. The case was solved. And Ewan knew exactly what would happen next. Blair would take credit. Ewan smiled. "Inspector." "What?" "You did an excellent job." Blair blinked. "I did. Very thorough." Blair straightened. "Yes. You arrived just when everything was under control." Blair looked pleased. "I knew there was something suspicious about Dunmuir from the beginning." Ewan nodded solemnly. "I could tell." Callum coughed to hide a laugh. Blair ignored him. "We'll write this up as a major investigation." "Good. And your report will mention my involvement." "Absolutely." Ewan looked toward the hills. "And mine." Blair hesitated. "You assisted." "Excellent." That was exactly the amount of glory Ewan wanted. No more, no less. 3 days later, Glenborough had returned to normal. The newspapers called the case a historic property scandal. Vane and Sloane faced murder charges and additional accusations connected with fraud and intimidation. Agnes Fraser gave a full statement and was allowed to remain free while the circumstances of Rory's death were reviewed. Mrs. McBride became locally famous. She hated it. Callum stayed in Glenborough. He repaired boats. He also stopped watching Dunmuir. The house was sold again before winter. Ewan went back to the hotel. Mrs. Fraser placed a plate of stew before him. You solved it. No. You caught them. Blair caught them. She laughed. You're impossible. I prefer comfortable. She poured his coffee. Outside, the hills were green beneath the evening mist. Ewan leaned back. For the first time in days, nobody wanted anything from him. No questions. No paperwork. No strangers. No clues. No murder. He closed his eyes. Then the telephone rang. Ewan opened one eye. Mrs. Fraser stared at him. Don't answer it. Excellent advice. The telephone rang again. Ewan ignored it. Again. He reached for his coffee. Again. Finally he stood. I hate telephones, he answered. Macrae. A voice from Stratharden said, Constable, there's been another. Ewan hung up. Mrs. Fraser stared. Was that wise? No. Then why did you do it? Ewan sat down. Because tomorrow is another day. He lifted his coffee. Outside, the wind moved across Glenbarra, carrying the smell of rain from the mountains. The village was quiet. The sea was quiet. For once, the police station was quiet. Ewan smiled. He had solved a murder, avoided promotion, and acquired a very good excuse for ignoring the telephone. It had been a successful week, and if anyone asked, he had done almost nothing at all. That, Ewan thought, was the sort of police work. Solving everything, while appearing to do almost nothing. Chapter 11. The thing left unsaid. By Monday morning, Glenbarra had invented 7 versions of what had happened at Dunmuir. Ewan rather liked it. He sat in the hotel with a mug of coffee and a newspaper folded over his face. Mrs. Fraser watched him from behind the counter. You're hiding. I'm reading. The newspaper is upside down. I'm reading the advertisements. You've been staring at the same one for 10 minutes. It's a very interesting advertisement. She came over and turned the paper around. Ewan sighed. Now you've spoiled it. The article beneath his hand carried the headline, Stratharden Police Break Dunmuir Conspiracy. Blair's name appeared 3 times. Ewan's appeared once, near the bottom. As an assisting constable. Perfect. He folded the paper. Any word from the chief inspector? He sent a message. What did it say? That he is pleased with your cooperation. Ewan looked suspicious. That's dangerous. Why? Praise. Mrs. Fraser smiled. You've spent years pretending to be useless. It's exhausting. You could stop. Never. The hotel door opened. Callum Bell entered carrying a wooden crate. He placed it on the counter. Morning. Ewan looked at him. What's that? Boathouse papers. I thought the police took everything. They did. Then why have you got them? Callum smiled. Because these weren't evidence. He opened the crate. Inside were old tools, photographs, letters, and a small wooden box. Ewan frowned. What's that? My father's. Where did you find it? Under the floorboards at my mother's cottage. Ewan opened the box. Inside was a pocket watch. The glass was cracked. A scrap of paper lay beneath it. Ewan unfolded the paper. 3 words, for the constable. Callum looked surprised. It must have been written before Rory died. Ewan studied the handwriting. Do you recognize it? Yes. His? Callum nodded. Ewan read the note again. What does it say? Nothing. Callum frowned. You're holding it. I mean, it says nothing useful. He handed the paper over. Callum read it. His face changed. What? There is something missing. What? The watch. Ewan held it up. It's here. No. Callum pointed to the back. Look. Ewan turned the watch over. A small inscription had been scratched beneath the case. C. Fraser. Ewan stared. Your father knew Mrs. Fraser. Everyone knew Mrs. Fraser. No. Ewan shook his head. This is different. He looked toward the hotel counter. Mrs. Fraser had gone very still. Agnes? She looked at him. What? Come here. She walked slowly toward them. Ewan showed her the watch. Her face drained of color. I haven't seen that in 20 years. Why is your name on it? I don't know. Don't lie. She closed her eyes. Then she sat down. Rory gave it to me. When? The night he died. Why? He told me to keep it safe. From whom? Sloane. Ewan waited. He said the watch contained proof. Callum stared. Proof of what? Who really started the fire? Ewan opened the watch. Inside the casing was a tiny strip of paper. He unfolded it carefully. A list of initials appeared. A.F., A.V., P.S., C.B. Callum read them aloud. Agnes Fraser. Alistair Vane. Peter Sloane. Callum Bell. His face went white. Why is my name there? Mrs. Fraser shook her head. I don't know. Ewan looked at the dates written beside the initials. They were from 20 years ago. One date appeared beside Callum's name. The night Rory died. Callum stepped backward. I told you. I was on the hills. Ewan said nothing. I didn't kill him. I know. You believe me? Yes. Callum stared. Why? Because if you had killed your father, you wouldn't have spent 20 years trying to prove someone else did. That doesn't prove anything. No. Ewan folded the paper. But it tells me what kind of man you are. Callum looked away. Mrs. Fraser began crying again. Ewan disliked crying. It made everyone uncomfortable. He poured her a glass of water. There's something else. She looked up. What? Why did Rory write Callum's initials? I don't know. Ewan looked at the watch, then at the inscription. C. Fraser, not C. Bell. That bothered him. He left the hotel. The morning was clear and cold. He walked toward the church. The graveyard was empty. He found Rory Bell's grave. There was something lying on the stone, a folded envelope. Ewan opened it. Inside was a final photograph. Rory stood outside the boathouse. Behind him was the lock. In the corner of the image stood a teenage Callum. But Callum was not looking toward his father. He was looking at someone else. Ewan studied the photograph. A figure stood in the trees. A woman. Ewan recognized her coat, red scarf, the same woman he had seen at Dunmuir on the first morning. He turned the photograph over. One sentence was written on the back. She was there before all of us. Ewan stared toward the road. The village suddenly seemed less peaceful. Someone had known about the truth before Vane, before Sloane, before Agnes, perhaps even before Rory. Ewan folded the photograph. Then he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Mrs. Fraser stood at the cemetery gate. You found it, she said. Ewan nodded. Who is she? Mrs. Fraser did not answer. Agnes. She looked toward the hills. Her name is Eleanor Voss. Who is she? Mrs. Fraser swallowed. The woman who owned Dunmuir before the McAllisters. Ewan stared. She died 25 years ago. No. Mrs. Fraser shook her head. Everyone thinks she did. The wind moved through the graves. Ewan looked toward the distant house. For the first time since the case began, he felt genuinely uneasy. The murder was solved. The conspiracy was exposed, but one secret remained, and it had been waiting for him all along. He put the photograph into his pocket. Mrs. Fraser. Yes, coffee first. She almost laughed. Of course. Ewan looked once more toward Dunmuir. Then he walked back toward the village, wondering how a dead woman could possibly be watching him. Chapter 12. The Woman Who Never Died. Ewan McCrae had always considered ghosts overrated. They were supposed to rattle chains, appear in mirrors, and make mysterious noises at inconvenient hours. In Glenbarra, however, people were quite capable of doing all three without being dead. Eleanor Voss was another matter. According to the church records, she had died 25 years earlier. According to Mrs. Fraser, she had not. Ewan sat in the hotel kitchen, while Mrs. Fraser poured coffee. Start at the beginning, he said. I already have. No. You've started at the part where everything becomes frightening. I want the boring part. She sighed. Eleanor Voss owned Dunmuir before the McAllisters. How did she lose it? She didn't. The McAllisters bought it. They claimed they did. Eleanor disappeared. When? 25 years ago. Then the McAllisters moved in. Yes. And nobody questioned it. People did. Quietly. Very. Ewan drank his coffee. Where did Eleanor go? I don't know. You told me she was alive. I said everyone thinks she died. Why? Because a body was found. Whose? A woman no one could identify. Ewan frowned. Then how did they know it was Eleanor? They didn't. Yet they buried her? The McAllisters arranged the funeral. Ewan put down his cup. That is remarkably suspicious. It was a different time. It was still suspicious. Mrs. Fraser looked toward the window. Eleanor had discovered what the McAllisters were doing with the land. The same scheme. Yes. And Rory discovered it later. Yes. Why didn't Eleanor expose them? She tried. What happened? She vanished. Ewan sat back. So the land conspiracy began before Rory. Long before. And Sloane. He worked for the McAllisters. And Vane. Vane was younger then. Ambitious. Clara. Her father was one of the lawyers. Ewan thought about the photograph. Why was Clara at Dunmuir 20 years ago? I don't know. Mrs. Fraser's voice was suddenly uncertain. Ewan noticed. You do know something. I know that Clara's mother was Eleanor's closest friend. Name. Margaret Voss. Ewan stood. Where does she live? She doesn't. Dead. No. Then where? Fraser hesitated. In Inverness. Ewan reached for his coat. I'm going to see her. You'll need a car. I'll borrow one. You hate driving. I hate many things. An hour later, Ewan was sitting opposite Margaret Voss in a small Inverness cottage. She was 82, sharp-eyed, and surprisingly energetic. You look like Eleanor, Ewan said. Margaret smiled. That is why people are afraid of me. Mrs. Fraser says Eleanor is alive. She is. Where? Margaret looked at him for a long moment. Closer than you think. Ewan waited. Margaret opened a drawer and removed an old envelope. Inside was a photograph. Eleanor stood beside a young Margaret. A teenage girl stood between them. Clara. Ewan stared. She knew Eleanor. She was her goddaughter. Why did Clara deny knowing her? Because Eleanor asked her to. Why? To protect her. From whom? The McAllisters. Ewan leaned forward. What happened 25 years ago? Margaret's hands trembled. Eleanor discovered that the McAllisters planned to remove families from their land. She gathered evidence. She intended to take it to the authorities. But she was betrayed. By whom? Her solicitor. Who? Alistair Vane's father. Ewan's eyebrows rose. That family again. Margaret nodded. He arranged the false sale documents. And Eleanor? She escaped. Where? France first, then Canada. Ewan blinked. She has been alive all this time. Yes. Why return now? Because Rory's death brought everything back. Ewan sat silently. Where is she? Margaret smiled. She came home yesterday. Ewan's stomach tightened. Yesterday? Yes. Where is she now? Margaret pointed toward the window. At Dunmuir. Ewan drove back through rain. By the time he reached Glenbarra, evening had fallen. Dunmuir House stood dark against the hills. Ewan entered through the unlocked door. Eleanor? No answer. He walked into the drawing room. A woman stood beside the window. She was elderly, tall, and dressed in a dark green coat. Ewan recognized the red scarf. You've been watching me. She turned. Yes. Why? Because you were asking the right questions. Ewan studied her. You're Eleanor Voss. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? You didn't ask. That seems unfair. She smiled. You are a policeman. You should know that answers depend on questions. Ewan looked around the room. Did you leave the stone? Yes. The dead bird? No. The button? Yes. The messages? Some. Who left the others? Sloane. And the man with the scar? Peter Sloane's brother. Ewan nodded. Where is Sloane now? In custody. Good. Eleanor walked toward the desk. The ledger was never the real secret. Ewan frowned. What was? She touched the photograph. Proof that the land was never legally sold. To whom? To the people who still live here. Ewan stared. Then the houses could be reclaimed. He smiled slowly. That will make the lawyers unhappy. Eleanor handed him a sealed envelope. What is this? The original deed. Ewan looked at it. Why give it to me? Because you are the only person in Glenbarra who doesn't want anything from it. That may be the nicest insult I've ever received. She smiled. Outside, footsteps approached. Callum entered. He stopped when he saw Eleanor. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Eleanor crossed the room and embraced him. You have your father's eyes, she whispered. Callum began to cry. Ewan quietly stepped outside. Some moments belonged to other people. He returned to the village near midnight. The hotel was closed, but Mrs. Fraser had left coffee on the stove. Ewan poured himself a cup. The telephone rang. He stared at it. It rang again. He ignored it. Then he smiled. The case was finished. The village was safe. The truth was finally out, and nobody had offered him a promotion. Ewan sat beside the stove, listening to the wind against the windows. Tomorrow there would be lawyers, then arguments, then paperwork. He would avoid all of it whenever possible. For tonight, however, there was coffee, rain, and silence. Ewan lifted his mug. To almost nothing, he murmured. Outside, the Highlands disappeared beneath mist. Inside, Glenbarra slept, and for the first time in weeks, so did Ewan. For once,